All right, let's jump into the three pack. One of for us as agents, it's imperative that we sit down and identify, especially every year when we reevaluate our a business plan. But each agent should have 3 to 5, I think, solid lead sources that they've identified. These are going to be where I'm primarily going to get my leads, and I think networking events, if you know how to work them properly. I think networking events can be a massive lead source for us as agents. And so it's one thing to show up to a networking event. It's another thing to show up to a networking event with a strategy and a plan of what is going to happen. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I recommend it, and I just went through this with my team last week because I love networking events. I get a lot of business from networking events, but I think it's imperative that as real estate professionals that we are identifying and attending a couple of networking events per month. So what are networking events? It could be anything where there's groups of people. It could be kids' activities, whether it's sports activity or a school activity. It could be a professional networking event that a lot of us go to. It can be happy hours, and I could have probably just on some of these put non-agent in a parentheses on a lot of these. We're not talking about the office happy hours, right? That's a different type of networking, but I'm talking about other happy hour events where there are potential buyers and sellers there that you can communicate. It can be a non-agent type conferences. It can be parties, whether it's neighborhood events or neighborhood parties or Christmas parties or birthday parties, and so when you get that opportunity to go to a party, because that's my initial response when my wife's like, "Hey, we're going to a party." I'm like, crap, I don't want to go to another party. But then I got to flip the switch. Okay, I'm selling real estate, so this now presents an opportunity to connect with buyers and sellers. And Todd, there's just a gazillion types of networking events that we could include in this list.
I thought when we started off with a 3-pack, I was going to end up having to say, networking events sounds like it's a job. It sounds like I got to get up and I got to go to work. But the reality is that once you've internalized that you're a real estate agent, you've kind of got to carry that persona always with you. You've got to be prepared to turn it on in a shopping center if somebody comes up and asks you a question, right? So when you go into these other activities, you have to consider the fact, what's the likelihood that someone in this group is going to want to have a conversation about a real estate? Well, potentially pretty good, but they just don't want to talk to someone who identifies themselves as a realtor. How many times, Mike, have you said that, right?
Yeah. Nobody wants to talk to a realtor, but everybody wants to talk about real estate.
But the moment that you bring up something like, I don't know, just some things that are in the news. So you say, oh, okay, potential tariff on Canadian lumber. What's that going to do to America? Well, Chicken Little's falling, the sky's going to... Well, you need an answer. You need to be prepared to have an answer that promotes business and promotes the reason, then you better get a house now before the lumber goes up. But anyway, those are the types of things. But I was happy to see that it was not just business events. It's everywhere and anything that you go.
Could be golf.
It could. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, if it's golf, then it's a write-off, so you can prepare for that.
Bro, the way we all met Cindy, my accountant that was here a couple weeks ago. Everything listed here is a write-off.
In fact, Mike's writing this
because as she says, I write all of this stuff off as advertising.
Apparently, he also writes off whenever he and I do events together, so that was fun to learn. It's intentionality. I mean, 100%. These events, yes. Nobody likes extra events. No one likes their Sunday when there's football on to be caught up with going to a 4-year-old's birthday party from 1 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
You have stuff to get off your chest this morning? I mean, that sounds personal. Shauna's not listening to this, is she?
We have a very hard and fast rule in my house. Birthday parties are Saturday from 10 to 11:30 a.m. If they're outside that window, we ain't going, FYI.
Husband of the year right there, 100%.
But these are things that agents consistently don't think about. Salespeople need to be thinking about. If there's an event in the neighborhood, you want to walk over there. You want to have a conversation. Because the person farming that neighborhood, you better believe they're there, and they probably sponsored it. If they didn't, they brought a whole bunch of snacks for the kids.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into some of the strategies, because for me, and this is just me personally, and Clay Fouts is going to be rolling over in his grave when I say this. I'm not showing up to these wearing my name badge.
Oh no.
And I'm not showing up with the intent of I've got to hand out all of my business cards, because I'm wanting to have deeper real estate conversations. And so that leads to point number 2 is, and I call it shrink the room. And what I mean by shrink the room, it's identifying ahead of time what your goal is. I can walk into a room and there's 100 people there, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. It can be incredibly daunting. And then I can easily just get into that mode. Okay, I just got to introduce myself to all 100 people, hand out my business cards to all 100 people, and hope that they're going to call me back. And it doesn't quite work that way. You don't have to connect and meet everyone. So what I do when I'm going to a certain event, I'm determining how many people I think are going to be there and how long is the event, because how long the event is going to determine how many quality connections and quality real estate conversations that I can have. So I determine ahead of time of how many connections I want to make, and I'm just satisfied. If I'm showing up to an event, there's 100 people, but the event's an hour long. If I walk away with 2 quality connections and I say that is my goal ahead of time, that's shrinking the room, and I feel pretty good about the other 98 people. It is what it is. I'd rather have quality conversations over quantity, and then I just start the conversations easy. What do you do for a living? And let them talk about what they do for a living, because chances are they're going to reciprocate that, and they're going to ask you what you do for a living. So if you walk into a room of 100 people, you don't need to feel overwhelmed or intimidated. You just need to reach your goal.
And it's kind of like there's like a high school or a grammar school gymnasium on some kind of dance night, I mean, you got all the people lining the walls, but then you got people dancing. And the people that are dancing are comfortable being who they are, and they're out there doing it. And the people that aren't are the ones that are in fear of that interaction. It's the same kind of thing that you brought from your childhood that you don't even realize it into these kinds of environments. And it's simple though. If you want to learn, go around the groups of people that are listening to the larger groups of people that are listening to one person talk, because there's a good tendency that you got learning people in that group, and you've got one person that you probably want to get to know, which is the person that's doing the most of the talking. And so you can kind of look at the room. This is just what I've always done. Mike, you and I go way, way back with this. But to shrink the room, you have to identify, okay, and sometimes you may not have a specific number before you go into the room, but you can scan the room when you first get there, and you can develop that.
Well, yeah, but I still
quick.
think goals are everything, and and the goal is, this is my minimum, and you have to walk in having a minimum. I want to walk away with a minimum of X connections, but the operative term here, Nick, is shrink.
Yeah.
That was funny,
Honey.
The foreshadowing on your 3-pack with having our friend in the room today is fun, because usually we would start talking about CRMs, but I'm going to not talk about that right now and give it a little minute. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely the guy sitting against the wall, not wanting to go on the dance floor. But when you're in this environment and you're intentional in what your goals are and you want to have conversations, if you're not comfortable, which I'm usually not, you're just having questions. Ask questions to those people. Constantly. Walk up, hey, is your child here? Oh, hey, what brought you to this event today? Weather's crazy. Did you see the rain? I mean, you just start asking questions, and that opens up conversation, because the one thing people love to do is talk about themselves. So you get them talking about themselves, and you're not really having to do any work. They're going to ask you, what do you do for a living, or what do you think about X and Y? And you can easily turn the conversation into a real estate focused conversation. Not that you're going to represent them in a buy and a sell. You're just having real estate focused conversations.
Yeah, when I get home at night, if I walk through the door and my wife hands me a bourbon, I know we're going dancing, because that's the only way she's going to get me out on the dance floor. I gotta get juiced.
Sounds like a new song.
All right, and know your intent. So we've shrunk the room. We've set the goal. I want to meet 2 or 3 people. The goal, again, is not to hand out business cards to everyone. Just stop it. I don't even carry your business cards. Correct. Your primary goal is not to give your data. Your primary goal is to collect the data. So if I set my goal at this event is 2 quality connections, I'm going to have 2 deeper real estate conversations, then I know it was a success if I walk away and I've collected their name, phone number, and possibly their email. And then immediately that information has to get thrown into your CRM system, And then from there, and I think this is sometimes we're good at this. Sometimes we're great at collecting names and phone numbers. We do great at open house events or whatever the case is. But then we got to develop our follow-up cadence, and this is where your CRM system can help you. How often and how frequently are you going to continue to connect with that person? Just because they don't buy a house from you in the first 2 weeks doesn't mean that they're not going to be looking to transact in the next 12 months.
Well, and I think that's the same thing with this word that we use in the marketplace, which is converting. I think we try to over convert, and I think what we need to do is to have just regular conversations with people until those conversations open up an opportunity to have a conversation that you'd prefer to have, like maybe real estate or investing or interest rates or any of those types of topics. But again, I think that ultimately, if you go in with the intention to flyer the room with your information, you're not the most interesting person in the room. You want to be the most interesting person in the room, and sometimes that starts with a conversation of one with a wallflower. But at the same token, as people listen and overhear you, you may end up being, if you are careful with what you say, the most interesting person in the room.
And I would just remember always the goal is to collect data. You're working with individuals, human beings that have their own timelines on when they're going to transact, if they are at all. So yes, the cadence is very, very important because you need to be in front of them when they decide to make that decision. But you can't get discouraged, like Mike said, if in 2 weeks or even 6 months, a year, they're not ready to transact. When they are, if you do your job correctly, they're going to transact with you.
Well, it made me think about the conversion thing that I was talking about, and I kind of didn't finish the second half of the topic, so thank you for doing that. But the point really boils down to, if you just end up wanting to have conversations with people and you want to collect their information, the best way to collect their information is to go over and say hello. And if you don't go over and say hello, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times that I will have somebody in my database, somebody in my CRM raise their hand and reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm ready to buy or I'm ready to sell." And I first met them 2 years prior. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly common. And if I didn't establish my cadence and I wasn't continuing the follow-up, there's no way in heck they would have ever remembered me if I wasn't staying top of mind and I wasn't following
and
up.
The goal, too, is it might not be, Mike, just them that's interested in buying a home. It could be, somebody that they know or they bump into. And by being on purpose here, you could get other business as well.
All right, well, that is our 3-pack, maximizing networking events. All right.